Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Built Heritage Committee meeting of May 9th, 2023. I'd like to call the members to order. This hybrid meeting is being facilitated through Zoom and is being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the original custodians of the unceded land in which the city of Ottawa is located. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Today, it's a pleasure to welcome our new public members and also our returning public member to the Standing Committee for Built Heritage. We extend our heartfelt congratulations on your appointment to the committee, and we're thankful for your decision to serve your community. Your commitment to public service is both commendable and inspiring. The path ahead may be demanding, but it is also incredibly rewarding. May your tenure be marked by meaningful discussion and decisions, unwavering dedication, and a deep sense of fulfillment. Since this first meeting of this committee is being streamed live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel, I'd like to remind participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. For those participating here in the committee room, please use the microphone in front of you and keep your computer muted. I'll provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak and provide written submissions to this committee, written submissions can be made to council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator by calling 613-580-2424 extension 22953. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. In terms of regrets, I've received none. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they're called.
Councillor Kelly? Member Dote?
Yes.
Member Quinn?
Present.
Councillor Troster?
Here.
Member Madigan?
Here.
Councillor Leeper?
Here.
Member Legault?
Here.
Vice Chair Plount?
See.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you so much. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, are the minutes of Monday, April 11th, 2023 confirmed? Confirmed.
Yes.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is an update from staff on Heritage Community Improvement Plans. And we're going to start with a procedural motion to suspend the rules of procedure. Pursuant to Section 1, Subsection 2, the committee is being asked to suspend Section 83, Subsection 4, Subsection A, in order to allow the oral presentation. And I believe that Vice Chair Plount has the procedural motion.
Be it resolved that Built Heritage Committee waive the rules of procedure subsection 84(4)A to receive the verbal update from the program manager of the Heritage Planning Branch regarding the Heritage Community Improvement Plan at today's meeting in order to receive a prompt update and dispense with the requirement for staff to provide a separate written report on this verbal update presentation.
Received or carried? Carried. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chair. And on behalf of staff, welcome to our new committee members this morning. My name is Cor Curry. I'm the manager of Right-of-Way Heritage and Urban Design. Joining me on the screen, Leslie Collins, program manager of Heritage Planning. So we're here today, members of the committee, in a different bit of a fashion to take advantage of our new committee's terms of reference. We're here to talk about a specific project and here in the spirit of consultation and looking forward for some feedback from you on our Heritage Community Improvement Plan program. The Heritage Community Improvement Plan was a project initiated by the former council in January 2020 as a pilot program. The goal of the program is to provide financial relief for large-scale redevelopment projects involving designated properties. This program is a CIP and uses tax increment-based grants paid through anticipated increase in the municipal portion of the property taxes attributable to the redevelopment. Owners may receive grants equal to up to 75% of the increase of taxes paid over a 10-year period to a maximum of $500,000. And these projects and this $500,000 must cover restoration costs and heritage consultant and study costs. So since 2020, we've had 2 applications that have been approved by City Council, one at 35 William Street and one at 278-280 O'Connor. And so I'm going to use the 280-278 O'Connor Street project as an example of how it has worked. Here is the former site, the 2 designated buildings on O'Connor. We go to the next slide. We'll show the plans that came to committee that were approved. And if we go to the next slide, this is how the program worked. The current property taxes on those 2 former buildings were amounted to be about $41,000. And the estimated property taxes post-development this year will be $230,000. So over the 10-year period, the aggregate tax increase for the City of Ottawa will be $2.1 million. The restoration costs were approximately $1.3 million. And so to max out the grant, in this case, we are providing $500,000 over the 10-year period towards this application. Next slide. So as I indicated, today is an opportunity for us to engage with you on the CIP program and on the pilot. The pilot was due to end at the end of December 2022. However, we have extended it into 2023 to align with the overall departmental report going forward to Finance and Corporate Services next month on all of the City of Ottawa's CIPs. So this you'll see the recommendations on the specific program as part of that report. Next slide, please. So our analysis. We had only 2 applications over the last 3 years, and we have very few applications in the queue. We have only 1 project built. So the 278-280 O'Connor project, 35 William is the former restaurant site on William Street across the Bayard Market building, remains undeveloped. So really, we haven't had much data come out of this pilot project. It has been unclear, therefore, if the program is achieving the goals of supporting development of our designated properties and or activating our watch list. If you recall, we have about 40 properties on our heritage watch list. We have had very little take up in terms of seeing those heritage watch list properties activated. $500,000 is the cap for a project. These are obviously multi-million dollar projects. These are large scale redevelopments. It's also unclear to us whether $500,000 in 2023, it's a lot of money, granted, but for these multi-million dollar projects is sufficient to actually spur activity on these sites. And also now with the benefit of our new official plan and other goals that this new council has stated, it is unclear if the scope of this program is in alignment with those goals. Are we getting exemplar heritage conservation? Are there other public policy goals that we should be achieving beyond just heritage conservation as part of a CIP? So what Ms. Collins and I would like to talk to you about today are 2 options that we see moving forward to recommend to Finance and Corporate Services, and we're very interested in your feedback today. Option 1 is to maintain the existing pilot project and extend it until the end of 2025 and undertake at that point a more fulsome evaluation with the benefit of a bit more time. Obviously, it's been a very volatile last few years in the market with respect to the pandemic. And so with the benefit of more time and more stability in the market, we could gauge the impact of the program. However, if we move forward with this, we would recommend to committee and to council that the criteria and the requirements of the program be modified to clarify that the expectation is for the highest standards of heritage conservation in any project. And we would also submit that council could direct us to ensure that other public policy goals such as housing affordability, sustainable development, social equity are also achieved through the CIP beyond heritage conservation. We would also suggest consideration giving to time limits on approvals. We have had limited uptake to date. However, we have seen one project that was approved by council that is tied up $500,000, quite frankly, not move over the last 3 years. Those funds could be going to other projects, assuming that we had any in the queue. So introducing time limits or statute of limitations on projects should we not get shovel in the ground is a consideration as well. Our second option, if we could flip the slide, is to put the CIP program on hold, to freeze it, and instead pivot and renew our Heritage Grant program. So the Heritage CIP, as I referenced, is really focused on properties where there's redevelopment happening, where there's action happening, large-scale commercial, large-scale residential. Projects, large buildings that are, whether they're commercial or residential, that don't have any development occurring, but that have significant conservation costs, are not eligible for this CIP. They have to go through our Heritage Grant program. As part of Bill 23 and our review of the Heritage Register, that we're going to be sitting here a lot over the next 2 years, bringing forward several designations of large-scale heritage buildings. And a lot of them, quite frankly, will be owned by charities, not-for-profits, religious groups that do have limited constrained means to conserve the buildings that they own. We're seeing already, set aside Bill 23, just the evolution of Ottawa, where we're at in our city's evolution. We have a significant number of large masonry buildings that are 100, 115, 125 years old, churches, buildings in Lower Town and even in Center Town that are aging, and they're at the point that that significant conservation masonry work need to be done. So our second option for your consideration is to freeze the CIP program and instead pump $500,000 into a new grant program. We would envision giving 5 $100,000 grants, so significant dollars, towards conservation projects for not-for-profits, religious groups, and charities. Currently, right now, our existing grant program is $300,000 citywide, and the maximum project envelope is $25,000, and that has to be matched. So, if you're a large church or a large former school, the maximum dollar amount is $25,000 for conservation. So our recommendation would be that we would not only add more money to this program, but that we would also increase the grant size. As we know, conservation works of a large scale are often more than $50,000, hence the need for more dollars. So those are the two options. At this point, happy to talk about the CIP program, answer any questions related to those two applications, and certainly the two options that staff have brought forward today. It's intended to be a conversation and interested in your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the update. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much. So just to clarify though, under the current program, is there one $500,000 grant per year, or is it technically unlimited?
Councillor, great question. For clarification, it's $500,000. The program is $500,000 a year. So to be candid, that $500,000 usually gets soaked up with one project because of the cost. So typically it's one project a year.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think you explained it really well. I'm inclined to go with option 2. I can think of the Bronson Center in my ward, which literally has bricks and masonry falling on the sidewalk, and they are desperate for assistance because they're a nonprofit and it's all small nonprofits in that building. They eventually want to redevelop and incorporate the facade, but their need is now. So, you know, I would really love to see this kind of money go to those small charities that are often stewards of these buildings.
Thank you so much, Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. One quick question, does some of our SIPs require that they demonstrate need? So in our economic development SIPs, for example, there's for some of them a requirement that they demonstrate that the project wouldn't move ahead without the benefit of the SIP grant. Is that the case with Heritage? It demonstrates that the development or the preservation would not happen without the SIP, or is it assumed?
I'm going to ask Leslie to weigh in on that, being more familiar with the exact criteria than I am.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Councillor. Thank you. There is a requirement. There was a requirement within the pilot project that basically the applicant affirmed that the project wouldn't happen otherwise without the grant. And I think that might be some of the reason we haven't received as many applications, because honestly, in these huge developments is 500, if, you know, it's unlikely that $500,000 is making or breaking a project. I think the other piece of the puzzle is that most of the buildings that we would be contemplating these types of CIP grants on would be already designated. So we're starting from a point where we want them to be retained as a starting point. But it's one of the goals of the program originally was to try to spur development of some of those neglected sites that we see around town. And I don't think we've seen that happen in the limited time period we've had, pandemic notwithstanding.
Yeah, with the $500,000 grant, I'm thinking about the McGee House, for example. So is the SIP intended to spur redevelopment of sites like McGee, where that extra economic benefit might, you know, be enough to help somebody make the decision to move ahead with the redevelopment?
Yes, absolutely. That's a scale of project that it was intended to activate for redevelopment.
And have you got any insight as to have you spoken to developers like that and property owners like that to get a feeling at this point for whether $500,000 is enough, or you're saying you still don't know if it's the right amount?
Chair, certainly the opinion has been expressed that $500,000 is not enough. However, I don't think I can also sit here and say unequivocally that's been tested.
Yeah.
You know, there's always the view that more would be better. But we've had, I would say, 5 or 6 potential applications. We have, I think, 2 that we're in negotiations with right now, potentially. But they've been long, slow negotiations. There hasn't been a spirit of zest to do this.
Wholesale embracing. Does heritage conservation fall under one of the eligible costs for the new CBC, the new community benefit charge? Like, can it be stacked so that if you're redeveloping something like McGee with a 4-story mixed use, you're preserving a significant amount of the building in an adaptive reuse? Can you stack a $500,000 grant and put a certain amount of your community benefit charge toward the preservation?
I would have to defer to Ms. Collins if she's aware, but I don't believe so. And if you're not aware, Ms. Collins, I can take that away because it's on a citywide basis. I think there we go.
I'm here. I'm sorry. I think that got deferred to me.
Yes. Where, Ms. Collins, or I might have to take that away, Councillor.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
We can. Yep.
I apologize. Sorry. The very time I join virtually, it's glitchy. I think the question was that could heritage conservation or restoration costs count towards the new CBC? Is that correct?
Exactly.
I'd have to go into it in detail by taking it away, but my general, the general premise is that conservation costs associated with conserving a property that is not already protected under the Heritage Act could qualify for the CBC. But the idea is that if you already own a designated property and you're going to develop it, the assumption is that you are going to retain the building because we're starting from a point of it already being protected. So that was sort of where we went with the CBC stuff. But we could provide a more detailed answer by taking that away.
Okay, I'm interested not just in the context of the scale of the grant that's being offered, because if that's doubled or tripled through a CBC drawdown, or because in Section 37 we've allowed drawdowns against Section 37 for heritage conservation. I think enriched bread, for example, or standard bread.
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm interested in the fact that we don't have a lot of tire kickers for $500,000 grant. It hasn't been enough to get developers of some of the properties that are falling down to come in and ask us, okay, let's take advantage of that grant and let's get redeveloping and save some of those buildings. So without a much larger grant, I'm having difficulty seeing that it's going to be particularly popular or successful. Whereas a $500,000 grant, or some share of $500,000 towards maintenance and conservation could make a big difference. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Troster that might be a more productive way to go. Will you solicit our feedback by email as well at some point?
Yes, Chair. The intention following today was to solicit feedback via email of all members of council that will roll into the overall departmental report for June Finance Corporate Services Committee.
You get a chance to sleep on it. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Member Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. I know how long and difficult a process it was to get the community improvement plan program in place. So I'm perhaps not as quick to dismiss it as some of my colleagues. And I do also recognize that during the years of the pandemic, there have been several development projects that have been impacted, have been put on hold, delayed. We've seen a drop in enthusiasm for development, perhaps not so much because of lack of enthusiasm, but because of lack of ability due to a range of factors. So I'm really hesitant personally to base this on base our decision on the success of one example in a time period that saw so many extraneous variables at play, which are new to us. This kind of tax incentive program has been, which is allowed in the province of Ontario, has been implemented in other municipalities throughout the province. Several of them have been using this kind of incentive for years. I'd be inclined to ask if there's the possibility of checking in with some of those municipalities to find out whether or not they also experienced a change during the pandemic in terms of uptake. Also, if there are strategies around marketing this program to the building sector, how are they being made aware of it? I think, although I do appreciate, I am hearing what you're saying in terms of the pivot to enlarging the existing grant program, but this tax incentive approach is a hard-fought win. So I'd like really personally wish that we could see a few more examples. So my tendency actually would be to see this extended to the end of 2025. But before I would make that decision, it would be nice to have some information on how other municipalities have been experiencing this over the period of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Member Quinn. Certainly, we're in talks with the City of Toronto and the City of London that have similar CIPs. Toronto is substantially changing its CIPs writ large. I can't comment on the Heritage CIP specifically. London, I believe, is maintaining the existing program that they have, but yes, we will be engaging with them further before Finance and Corporate Services Committee to determine if they are tweaking their programs and if we should undertake any of those considerations as part of ours. In terms of the marketing of our existing CIP, at all of the pre-application consultation meetings that we attend for any development, we do highlight the program with applicants as a way to encourage creative thinking about retaining our heritage properties.
Thank you so much for those questions. I wanted to narrow down, I think, on Member Quinn's question around marketing the CIP pilot. I was just curious whether there was direct overtures to those 40 properties that you mentioned were on the watch list.
Chair, that's a good question. I don't think that there has been direct marketing, unless you can correct me, Ms. Collins. Certainly it is on the city's website. As I mentioned, we do speak about the program in our pre-application consultation. Have we contacted all 40 and spoken about the program? I don't believe so. I will say, and I don't have the percentage in front of me, but this is again for large scale residential commercial projects. A good bulk of the watch list properties are small scale residential, foreign owned properties as well, so wouldn't be eligible. So just to give you that context, but Leslie, do you want to layer on anything further?
No, I think I think you've covered it.
Well, thank you so much for this update. I don't see any other hands raised. I really appreciate the update, especially since Council is looking at the efficacy of the CIP programs in total. I like the fact that we do have also a viable option in front of us. I would agree with my colleagues that there are many heritage properties, especially owned by charities, churches, nonprofit organizations that do require restoration. And it would be interesting to see the potential of another option, another tool. I think of another building in your ward, Councillor Troster, on Elgin, a church that was having tremendous issues around degradation and the need for restoration. So I think that this is an interesting option and an interesting option that will be before us for further comment, as well as for comment from Council, which we appreciate. So thank you so much for this very informative presentation. And I don't believe that we need to receive anything. Okay, receive. Is the presentation received? Received, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is application to alter 514 Manor Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Can staff please provide a presentation?
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, committee members. Before us is an application to alter 514 Manor Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The subject property is outlined in red on this slide. It's located in Ward 12, Rideau Rockcliffe, on the northeast corner of Manor and Hillcrest. The property contains a 2.5-story stone and wood-clad dwelling constructed in approximately 1914 in a vernacular arts and crafts style that fronts onto Manor Avenue. It has a large rear yard with several mature trees. Next slide, please. This slide here shows some of the existing conditions on the property. To the left, this photo shows the corner elevation of the existing house along Hillcrest. The applicant is proposing a 1-story addition along this elevation. And the top right photo shows the front elevation along Manor. The applicant is proposing an accessory building with a sunken garage and pool house in the interior side yard that's seen in this photo. And then bottom right there shows the property in its rear yard as seen from Hillcrest Road. For context, in 2016, the owner proposed to sever the eastern portion of the lot, and the application was denied by the Committee of Adjustment, but permitted by the Ontario Municipal Board in 2017. After this decision, the owner did not fulfill the related conditions of approval within the prescribed timeframe, thereby rendering the severance lapsed. So as such, the heritage permit that we're considering today only considers the existing lot in its entirety and not the severed lots. Also, I'll note that a heritage permit was issued in 2017 to facilitate window and siding replacement, stone repointing, and the replacement of the deteriorated roof structure, as well as the addition of roof dormers, which can be seen in these photos here. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the landscape plan for the property, which illustrates the placement of the proposed alterations. The one-story addition is proposed on the south elevation along Hillcrest Road, set back 1.4 meters from the existing house. And an enclosed porch is proposed behind that addition. So 1 and 3 on the photo there. An accessory building containing a sunken garage is proposed to align with the existing driveway, with its front elevation wall aligning with the rear elevation wall of the existing dwelling. And the one-story pool house that sits above the sunken garage is further set back 6.3 meters from the garage entrance, allowing for a canopied green roof above the garage entrance towards the pool house entrance. There's also several landscape enhancements proposed as part of the alterations, including the reinstatement of the historic boulder wall along Hillcrest, as well as the retention of 20 existing trees and new plantings as well. Next slide, please. Here is a rendering of the proposed accessory building on the left and of the addition on the right, as seen from Manor Avenue. Both the accessory building and the addition have been designed to complement the existing grade 1 dwelling by being set back and shorter in height from the existing house, and by borrowing design elements from the existing house, such as matching wood cladding, wood-clad windows, stone accents, gable roof lines, bay window features, and bracket detailing. Next slide, please. And here we have the streetscape elevations along Manor and Hillcrest, demonstrating how the proposed alterations will interact with the neighboring grade 1 properties to the north and east along Manor and Hillcrest, respectively. Noteworthy here is that aligning the proposed garage with the existing driveway eliminates the need to interrupt the landscape along Hillcrest Road with a new structure or a new driveway. Next slide, please. Staff are of the opinion that this proposal complies with the Rockcliffe Park HCD policies and guidelines and the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. The reasoning being that the one-story addition and accessory garage and pool house are carefully sited to minimize interruptions in the existing landscape, and they are lower in height than the existing dwelling and use the same natural materials as the existing dwelling. Next slide, please. In terms of consultation, the application submission materials were posted on the city's DevApps website. The Rockcliffe Park Residents Association participated in the pre-consultation program and was notified of the application. And Heritage Ottawa, neighbors within 30 meters, and Chair King are also aware of the application. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff are recommending the approval of the proposed alterations, inclusive of the new accessory building and addition. As conditions of approval, staff are requesting that the owner submit a heritage permit application for the front entrance canopy to be processed under delegated authority, since the final design details for that feature have not yet been confirmed. We're also requesting that a final tree information report and landscape plan be submitted to the satisfaction of the city's forester, that the historic boulder wall along Hillcrest Drive be reinstated, and that material samples be submitted. Staff is also requesting that authority be delegated for minor design changes that may arise, and that the heritage permit be approved with a 2-year expiry date. Next slide, please. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the in-depth presentation. We do have 2 registered speakers, the owners who are here today. Would you will you need to speak if this application is carried? Okay, thank you. Does the committee have any questions for staff? Member Madigan.
A few comments to submission. I found the submission was very well done for the application. There's some information in the application. I was wondering if it could be further continued. The information seems to point that the house was originally assessed as a 1940s house, but there's some evidence that it was 1914. To me, that should be updated in the heritage record because one of the key things in heritage is age, and will change the value of how you assess the house. The house was renovated in, I think, 2017, 2016, changing the color from red to the current scheme, which is quite attractive. But it would seem that the original color was red, which included the roof itself. And where that should be part of the record for the heritage property, that would be something to think about. The owner in the report submitted that they have found some of the original cedar shingles where the house had been redone with red asphalt shingles. Having worked on a couple of houses from the period, it's quite possible the original shingle roof was itself red. I recall working on a house which had cedar shingles that had been re-roofed a number of times. In current memory, everyone thought of it as just a natural cedar roof, but in moving into the inside of the house, we found original cedar shakes that were used as shims in doing some of the interior fit up, and they all have been pre-finished with a red stain. Last comment, there's been a number of changes that sort of seem to take the house away from its the setting of Rockcliffe Park and sort of key aspects of the change of the wall from a sort of random boulder wall to a dry stack wall, which works the same materiality, but it has become more formal. There's the change to the color of the house, and of course the changes to the landscape. I noted that in the application, the further design of the porch is still to be considered. I would think that perhaps, given that there's been a number of changes to the original house, maybe the porch design should lean towards maybe the original design, if that's something to consider. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do know that we're going to have an amending motion for the Heritage Impact Assessment document that I believe will address some of those original oversights. So thank you. And Member Legault.
This is just a point of clarification in the presentation. I think there's a mix up in the standards. Standard 3 is minimal intervention, and it should be standard 12. So this is a rehabilitation project. Unfortunately, I did not go through the application in quite like a rigorous level of detail, but I would just caution to make sure that this really conforms to standard 11, in that the new materials are distinguishable from the existing materials and not trying to recreate something that already exists. But it does seem like the form, the materiality, and sort of the setback of that new side addition, and then the placement of that new garage is very respectful of the heritage.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments. Are there any other additional questions for staff or comments on this item? Seeing none, we do have an amending motion replacing document 6 for the Heritage Impact Assessment. Vice Chair Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Whereas with respect to report ACS 2023 RHU 0016, a previous version of document 6, Heritage Impact Assessment referenced the severance of the property which is no longer being sought, and whereas a revised document 6 Heritage Impact Assessment has been submitted to evaluate the existing lot size in its entirety and remove references related to the property severance, and whereas the revision of document 6 Heritage Impact Statement have no impact on the staff recommendation and or the approval of the application to alter 514 Manor Avenue. Therefore, be it resolved that document 6 Heritage Impact Statement be replaced and report ACS 2023 pre-RHU 0016 be approved as amended. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. So is the amending motion carried? Carried, thank you. Is the report carried?
Carried.
Thank you. So this report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council tomorrow for consideration. The last item on our agenda is the status update for Built Heritage Committee inquiries and motions for the period ended April 21st, 2023. There's no presentation and there's been no correspondence. We don't have speakers on this item. Does the committee have any questions or comments on this item? Councilor Leeper.
Thank you very much. One of the outstanding directions, yes, from March 8th, 2022 from Councilor McKenney, Heritage Planning Staff and Legal Services to provide a memo to committee identifying tools available to the city to compel property owners to address deteriorating heritage properties. Where is that? Excuse me.
I see Miss Collins is joining the call again, so I will
Hi again, Leslie.
with pleasure refer over to her.
Thank you, Chair. The short answer is we have not provided that memo yet. The long answer is we are still exploring this, and I think in the context of all the changes with Bill 23, et cetera, that has been delayed a little bit in terms of how sort of the landscape has shifted in the last few months. So I think that is something that we need to put back on the front burner sooner rather than later.
It's not immediately obvious to me that Bill 23 affects compelling landowners to fix the buildings.
I think the Bill 23 effects are more some of those properties that we have not designated that we would want to see compelled. Those will likely not have any protection anymore and we won't be able to do anything. So I think that's sort of where I'm getting at with that. Some of the ones I think former Councillor McKenney's motion direction was particularly related probably to Somerset House. I think, nothing has really changed there in terms of Bill 23. But also, I think, as we've said in the past, it is very difficult to compel a property owner to develop a property. As this committee heard last year, the city has worked quite closely with that property owner in particular, to try to encourage redevelopment of that property, and have used many of the tools at our disposal, and we have been making progress on that. But that may be something that we need to provide an update on sooner rather than later, as I said.
Yeah, I mean, if staff don't consider that there's a lot of tools that we don't already know about with respect to compelling owners, I'm wondering if you're best off just letting us know that rather than having the motion staying on that report sort of month after month.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on the status update? Seeing none, is the report received? Received, thank you. There are no in-camera items. There are no notices of motion that have been submitted. Are there any inquiries? Seeing none. Other business, is there any other business? Seeing none. On adjournment, is the motion carried? We're adjourned. We'll ensure that's recorded. Thank you, everyone. The next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 13th.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci.